Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Amicable Divorce Network podcast. I am joined today by Stephanie Robbins. Stephanie is a therapist with Alpharetta Family Therapy in Georgia. She also serves as the Amicable Divorce Network board member for mental health. She's a certified amicable divorce professional and a major contributor to our book, Divorce Amicably, the Roadmap to Resolution. And today we are talking about the role of mental health professionals in divorce. And Stephanie is obviously an expert in this area. So Stephanie, I think the first thing that we were going to touch on is how people can identify if they need to seek treatment or help from a mental health professional. So if somebody's going through a divorce or you're a friend of somebody who's facing divorce, what are those signs?
Yes, thank you for having me today. And divorce is a deeply emotional experience. It's life altering. And people don't realize that they're going to have this flood of emotions. And that, like you were asking, what is the best way to know if you need a mental health professional? It's when those emotions get to be so overwhelming that you're not able to do your daily functioning, where it's hard to get out of the bed, it's hard to take showers, you're not focusing at work, if you're a parent going through the motions, not really being present, just your kid could be talking and you could just be ignoring them because your mind is somewhere else. So that's one sign. Another thing is when people have communication issues with their soon-to-be ex or high conflict, like finding ways to better communicate so it doesn't escalate to a certain level, or how to communicate best so that you can work together, collaborate, either splitting the assets or moving out, or even with the parenting the children and different things like that.
So let me just ask you a quick question because I had this come up. I had somebody one time, I did not help them through their divorce. I came in after the fact, and they said they wish they had known when they were going through their divorce that they had a high conflict divorce. They said they didn't know. They thought that this was just divorce and this is just how people were. So let's just take a little bit of a deviation and describe the signs. How do you know if you're in a high conflict divorce situation?
Well, there's a lot of signs.
Yeah.
The professionals are able to see it sometimes more than people when you're in the forest and the trees. But when you start where you really almost to the point where you hate your ex, you are playing games, you have a lot of anger and resentment, when you're causing blocks like in communication, or sometimes some people will like overly communicate, almost harassing, sending tons of text messages, pleading this and that, when people are trying to get their friends and family to pick sides, trying to turn the kids against them, trying to talk poorly about your other spouse to the children or to other people, smearing people. And then some people thrive on conflict. It's just part of their personality. I don't understand. I'm not that way. I'm
Me neither,
conflict
obviously.
first. But some people that it almost like adrenaline rush kind of gets them moving. Some people thrive on that drama. And so those are some of the signs.
Yeah. So I would say when I'm the lawyer in a case, I would consider it to be high conflict if the parties like can't even resolve a normal thing. Like, let's say one party can't pick up the child when they're supposed to and needs to make a different arrangements because they have a work obligation, for example. That's something, honestly, as an attorney, I should never hear about. The parties should be able to say, hey, I have this work conference. It's going to run late. I can't get the kids till 7. What can we do here? And they should resolve something like that themselves, and I should never know about it. When it's those little issues that your lawyer is hearing about or are ending up going to the court system, that's a really big red flag that this is high conflict, that you just can't work through sort of minor issues.
Yes, and they're getting divorced for a reason. In their marriage, they probably were having communication issues, or one person might have taken more of the load of the other, or now one person may not ever picked up the kids from school, and that's a new routine for them. And so going to their boss and asking for time off might be something new. So it might actually look like they're being high conflict, but they might just be inflexible and rigid. But again, if they had good communication skills and being able to discuss that. But when you have the high conflict, they cannot hear anything from their ex. The ex could be saying something very nice and warm, and they just see it as they turn it to negative. And a
Hmm.
lot of times, some people are high conflict because they have that fear
Yeah.
of uncertainty, and fear makes us negative, and or projecting the anger. Like sometimes we are mad at ourselves and we'll want to project that onto our ex.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so if you think you're in a high conflict situation, or you just feel like you need, to work through some skills, you can go to somebody like Stephanie, a mental health professional. So she can vest you with skills on how to talk to the person. Oh, this would be a really good way to lay this out, to have this streamlined communication, to handle things this way. So sorry for taking us a little bit off track there, but I think that's something that's important to note, because I think sometimes people don't know, or they assume they're in a high conflict situation. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're just going through a divorce.
Exactly. And I'm glad that you asked that question to, designate that.
Yeah.
So going
And I
back on,
think it's also important to say you don't have to put a label on it. You may just need some more co-parenting skills. You don't get any extra points for having the high conflict label or not. Everybody can benefit by having some new co-parent. These are new skills. You're now having to co-parent instead of sort of jointly parent in a way. So,
yeah. Well, and that's part of going to the mental health professional
yeah.
too. The co-parenting, like a lot of people will come to mental health professionals. How do I talk to my child about the divorce? How do we bring this up? Um, you know, Also the concerns about the kids. Are my kids going to adjust well? Kids are very resilient. How are we going to work out, the parenting plan and deal with like those transitions? Those are things that during, a therapy or co-parenting counseling session, they can talk about those logistics, almost having the mental health person as somebody like not like a mediator, but where they can have these communications where they feel safe. Like if they're at home, it might be harder or it's out, but
Yeah.
having somebody almost guiding and directing them.
Yeah, I think it's great to view it as a guide, somebody that can keep it unemotional, focused, hit the highlights, get you guys moving forward. So you touched on co-parenting. So what exactly is co-parenting counseling?
So, co parenting counseling, people can do it when they're going through the divorce or after. There are benefits of going to co parenting counselor before to talk about, like, okay, how are we going to communicate? Are we going to do emails? Are we going to use the Family Wizard program? How are we going to communicate for our child's calendar regarding, the parenting time, or like schedules? The kids have like sports or different dance recitals. The
Yeah.
co-parenting also can help like with discuss like discipline. Like if the child did something at one person's house, how are they going to address it at the other or not? What to do with school issues?
Yeah.
If the child is having issues in a certain subject, discussing, are you going to get a tutor? Getting the schools involved, those type of things.
And with co-parenting, they're there together. There might be an individual session to address some concerns and stuff, but the parties are there together. And something else I think to point out. So if a couple, whether they're still married or not, they come to you for co-parenting counseling, is that a confidential process? If the stuff hits the fan, are you testifying in court about that or not?
So as just a co-parent counselor, it is a confidential process. It's like going to couples counseling. It's the same
Yeah.
confidential. However, some people will get confused. There's something called parent coordination,
Right.
which is not confidential. And sometimes mental health professionals and other professionals do parent coordination. That's when they do go to testify in court. And that a lot of times those are when there's a lot of conflict or problems with communication.
Yes. So that's called parent coordination. I'm a lawyer. I'm a trained parent coordinator. You're a mental health professional. You're a trained parent coordinator. And that is where the court actually has somebody sort of like a private mediator for the parties, because they aren't able to reach these mutual decisions about simple issues like phone rules or an extracurricular activity, things like that, that the court absolutely won't mess with. And that's a different process. It more follows under alternate dispute resolution than mental health. And people use co-parenting and parent coordination, they sound so much alike, interchangeably. It's important to know these are two very different things.
For sure. And I've gotten calls where people are wanting a parent coordinator and just asking some questions about really what's going on. And if you do have the parent coordination, a lot of times the judge will put an order or specifics on that. The co-parenting, counseling is a little bit more friendly, more relaxed. It's a different process.
What would be some other indicators that people should seek counseling or some mental health assistance?
So, a lot of times people will feel stuck. They have that like problems letting go, the anger, or they almost become paralyzed because
Yeah,
they,
indecisive.
yeah, it's just so overwhelming, not sure where to go next, what to do. Sometimes people have never worked before and now it's so overwhelming they have to go find a job. Financially, never had to deal with budgets or different things or a household, those type of things where you can process. And then if somebody has a history of anxiety or depression, those symptoms might creep up more during this time because it kind of going through the grief process can kind of trigger that and kind
Yeah.
of resolving that.
It's often helpful for me if a client is in therapy, and I've even said before, like we're really at an impasse. We have to make this major decision, and a lot of times it involves the marital home, and because that's a financial issue and an emotional issue. And so sometimes I'm a lawyer. Don't come to me with your emotions. I won't assist you, or I won't do a good job of it. You need to go to somebody like Stephanie. But I've often said to clients, if you can in your next session, maybe focus on how we can move through this issue and come up with a final decision on that, because I've used all my skills and we're just not able to move forward. And a divorce involves a lot of micro decisions. How are we going to move forward on this? And sometimes people are just paralyzed.
Yes. And one thing is, I work a lot with attorneys, and we will sometimes have release of information. And
Yeah.
when I mean release of information, I'm not telling the attorney everything. But like, if the attorney is like, "Hey, they can call me up and say they're really having a hard time letting go of the house," that might be something you want to address. Kind of giving a heads up.
Yes. I've
That's
had that before, especially in our Amicable Divorce Network cases. And what's been also really helpful for me to hear from the mental health professional is, just to say, hey, they're having a really hard time with trust, with believing their spouse. What can you do to show them that they can believe this number, or they are just really depressed right now? I would suggest putting off this meeting or something like that, getting that feedback. Neither one of us have the time to go through everything that happened in a session, but just sort of getting those touch points does help me help my client better to have that ability.
yes. And one thing I do want to reiterate, as a mental health professional, we don't give legal advice.
Right.
People will ask us stuff, and we need to revert back to the lawyers.
Yes.
And things.
And I want to say, as a lawyer, I do not give mental health advice other than to, say, hey, co-parent counseling would be great here. Or I think, we could really work through this if you had some help, some individual therapy. I hopefully say that more artfully than that, and that people do get some assistance, but use the right tool for the problem. And at the Amicable Divorce Network, we have such a diverse bench of professionals, from financial, real estate, mental health, special needs children, whatever it is across the board, we have the right person for the job. So utilize the best people for it. Are there any other things people should be looking out for to know that they should get some mental health assistance?
There's probably so much more stuff, but it's when, you want to be your best self. Where you just need that extra support, guidance, that person that you can bounce ideas off of, or they will just listen and be there for you when family and friends might stir up some emotions. The mental health professional can be that stable person.
Yeah. I find sometimes friends and family can really sort of whip things up, and I've heard it called a negative advocate, where they are really not looking at what's best for you and how to move through this, but they're just like, that person's a jerk, oh, you need to get him, you need to stick it to him, we hate them, whatever it is, as opposed to looking at it holistically, because they just love and care about you so much that that's just the framework that they're coming from. And also sometimes people feel they've already burdened their friends and family so much. They're like, oh my gosh, this is all I ever talk about. They've got to be sick of me. That's, if you're feeling, that way, that's also normal and fine. And you can have a mental health professional who would love to sort all of this out with you and is a good person for that, and will help you also move forward, as opposed to sort of getting mired in this conflict.
Right. And, the mental health professional can help the person if they've never had boundaries. I have a hard time telling people know how, like a lot of times people are not very assertive, and teaching those assertive skills. You know, in the marriage, you might have been more passive, but now you have a voice. You need to speak up, and
Yeah.
that's scary, and how to do that.
Yeah.
Or they might be more aggressive communication that's blocking a lot of communication with their ex and causing more conflict and stress, and being helping them be aware of how tone, body language, and different things can affect people throughout.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is just such a really good time. If you're going through a divorce, even if you think you're handling it like a rock star, just touch in with a mental health professional. You know, you might find that you aren't. You can learn some new skills. You know, you can learn how to help your children better or yourself. And, you know, it's just a really good time to check in with somebody and just make sure that you are taking your care, your mental health seriously during this time. It is very stressful, and there are professionals dedicated to helping you. Stephanie, thank you so much for being one of those professionals. You're a great resource in our community. If people are listening and they would like to reach out to work with you professionally, how can they do that?
Thank you for having me here today. They can reach out on my website, which will be listed part of this podcast, and they can just text me that if they want to have a brief consult on the phone or want to set up an appointment. I'd love to have you.
Yes, Stephanie is a great resource. She contributed a lot of amazing content to our book, Divorce Amicably, The Roadmap to Resolution. You can check that out on Amazon and read a deeper dive into some of these topics. Her information, if you're driving, is also in the show notes. So when you pull over, you can grab that information. You can also find her in the Amicable Divorce Network directory under Georgia Mental Health Professionals. You will find her there and all of her information. So if you want to find Stephanie, you are able. You'd have to try really hard to not find her. She is everywhere and is a great resource for us. Stephanie, thank you so much for everything that you do for people. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.